I'm Saki, and I'm here with Karl Schaffer and Erik Stern. Starting with Karl, your initial experiences in math, good or bad?
The very first thing that I can remember doing that I would now call mathematical was playing with blocks that looked just like this, that had different colors and so on. When I was like 3 or 4 years old, and I would play with them for hours. And I spent my childhood playing with cardboard blocks called Buster blocks that you could make forts in. And I actually got this set of Soma cubes. This is the exact set I got when I was 10 or 11 years old and playing with them. And then later became intrigued with Martin Gardner's columns in Scientific American. And just one little dance connection, and that is also when I was about 10 or 11, we moved into a house with a great big staircase. And I gave myself the task every day, since I went up and down it all the time, to go up and down the stairs in a different way every single time. So now that seems to me as kind of a mathematical dance problem solving that I was doing or improvising. So, there's all that. Later in college and graduate school, I actually found mathematics as taught to be extremely dreary and annoying. And it wasn't really showing me what I found exciting and creative about it. So there you go.
I'll start cheerfully. After Kennedy was assassinated, soon after that, they started minting Kennedy $50. And they were in circulation, but they weren't as prevalent as quarters and nickels. So when my father would get a few that just happened to be given to him as change, he'd give them to my brother and me. So we started to develop a collection of these Kennedy. And basically, I had them in a coffee can, and I would just stack them in many, many, many different ways. And you notice that some numbers you can't stack an even number of piles. If you have 17 of them, you can't have even number of piles unless there's one in each pile, which isn't a pile. So that kind of game playing with something that's not even something you buy in the store as a block or something, I remember just doing that a lot and playing with them. The other thing, just to say, that I would say was mathematical was choreographing fights with David Escobar in my dining room and living room. And we also would really choreograph them, so we figured out how to go down the stairs and all that stuff. And I think that was pretty mathematical, so we had to work out very specifically what we would do to make the fight seem better. And the only thing I'll say is I would call, now there's fortunately a term called mathematical thinking. And mathematical thinking can be tied to symbols, but it's not necessarily. And I think I'm just going to stop there and say that's, I think that's early mathematical thinking I can remember doing.
Saki, what about you? You've worked with us for 20 years or 15 years with Erik, 20 years with me, done a lot of mathematical dance performances. What about you with respect to early math?
Initial experiences in the home, fantastic. Similar younger year stories to both of you, physical and manipulative of things. And it, to this day, it turns into a knitting and a crochet love, a cooking love, even if it's not practiced in the home as much. Outside of the home, I felt in the classroom setting as a youngster. I also got to be schooled in the States as well as Australia before 6th grade. And I did the calculations, worksheets, I suppose, without much feeling behind it. And that says something, I think. So Japanese heritage with origami and string figures. I think the fabric arts type of art passing on comes from my Japanese grandmother, still alive today. I have a second question.
All right.
how did you come to connecting math and dance, and how has that progressed?
In 1990, Eric and I created our first collaborative math dance show called Two Guys Dancing About Math. And we began by looking at mathematical concepts that are organically embedded already alive in the dances we had been choreographing and performing together. And we spent probably 4 or 5 months working 4 or 5 days a week, 4 or 5 hours a day in the studio, creating a show around what we found in dance. So we weren't doing what some people seem to think we do, which is take a mathematical idea and make a skit about it. We actually were finding ways and exploring ways that mathematics and dance are already so linked together that you can't pull them apart. And Scott Kim, who we've worked with also, likes to say that the question isn't how do you put these strange things, math and dance, together, but how were they ever separated to begin with?
I'll link onto that by going a little bit before why we even wrote a grant to do this, which was the fact that we really started first jokingly, and then we realized we weren't joking, noticing that the act of choreographing, of pattern creation, pattern manipulation, pattern organization, pattern expression, pattern investigation, that mathematics and choreography seemed darn similar. Different modes, but really similar. And then that led to lots of other things. I mean, Karl and I, and with Scott as well, have had a long career teaching workshops and creating many different shows. But we also connected it to the classroom. And so we both continue to do that. I've been working with some colleagues at my university and writing, teaching some classes for college mathematics and creative arts where they get their quantitative literacy, publishing articles and doing research, like comparing one set of research compared the movement-based mathematics class to a conventional one. So there's a lot of that stuff, and a lot of it indicates that doing, to paraphrase Catherine Dunham, 5 minutes of action of doing something sometimes gives us more understanding about things than volumes of writing.
And Eric and I, as he says, have been teaching this material for literally 30 years, teaching, exploring, playing with. And sometimes our paths have diverged. Sometimes they seem very similar. I've also been creating shows and also doing a lot of writing, which gets me to really think more carefully about what kind of mathematics is already connected to how dancers and choreographers work, and but also what kind of dance is already very close to what mathematicians are doing. So there's a back and forth, but in reality, the most pleasant occupation in these terms is playing with them both at the same time, say in the studio, in real life, in movement life.
And I think that's the most important thing to emphasize, because people think if we say we're doing mathematics that we do the math first and then go to the studio. It all starts in the studio. It all started in the studio with our physical expression and exploration, and that's where it always returns. Some of the excerpts are from our math dance work, and some of the excerpts are just from other dances we've done. And yet, at least for us, because of the nature of the choreographic process, they both have these interplay, honing, devising of pattern. Even if it's in the midst of something very highly physical, it's really considering that. So in our view, there is the work that I think is more explicitly connecting the two. But even if it's just, if not just, if it's choreography that is not explicitly about it, for us, there's always that element in it.
Yeah, I like to say that for me, the mathematics is part of the palette with which I want to create choreographically. It's part of the paint. And sometimes it comes to the fore, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes both those things happen within the same dance. And it doesn't really matter. A dance could start out being about some math concept and then go somewhere else, and the somewhere else is usually more exciting and interesting. So, and vice versa.
Which means that if I had to encapsulate our philosophy, it would be that you never have one just is merely the illustration of the other. You have to get to deal with both and let them, I don't know, bloom in their own way, both the mathematics and the dance, and just don't relegate one to being the illustration of the other.
We started to make a show almost 30 years ago about the Herman Melville story about Bartleby, who was a paper copyist in the 1800s, refused to do any work. And we wondered, how can we make a dance out of someone who refuses to do anything at all? And we decided to start playing with paper in the studio. And that generated an entire concert where we played with paper. But at some point, we realized that paper, ordinary sheets of paper, are the dominant prop in the math classroom. And so it's all there for the mining, if you want to mine it.
I don't consider myself an avid choreographer, but when I'm within the creation, having both of your experience and expertise, I get to reflect on my own process outside of this company's work, in that in identifying patterns, in the symmetry or asymmetry of anything from within my own body to those around me and on stage. And I do like doodling choreography or charting music, and my brain starts to bubble with those ideas just from learning from this experience together and embodying it. So thank you.